What do you mean? What do you mean by genetic entropy exactly?
So good question. So it's the fact that, well, we've gone over genetically why our genome is more and more data, more and more accumulating papers is suggesting that the genome is near fully functional. Like there's a project called the ENCODE project. It's a secular project. They reveal that over 80% of the genome is actively transcribed in RNA suggesting function. Now that's biochemical, so we don't know what every single gene, every single RNA is doing, but we know that there's activity there. And why would the cell transcribe all this junk? It would just be a waste of resources and energy. So we know that there's activity there now. Well, we're actually, creation scientists are making predictions that, hey, you knock out these genes, for example, and they're going to have this function or this function. So there's a lot of predictions coming from our side on DNA function, but the evolutionists assume the majority is junk, so they can't really make those predictions, unfortunately. But genetic entropy would suggest, okay, so our nuclear, we have our somatic cells, germ cell lines. Reproductively, we pass on about 100 new mutations per person per generation. Okay, so those accumulate. But the thing is, natural selection only acts upon the most detrimental of mutations. Boom, gets rid of it, right? And acts upon the best beneficial mutations. So let's say sickle cell anemia, melanoprotein, whatever, you can name it. But it doesn't do anything against the nearly neutral mutations because they're invisible to selection, because those mutations, David, they only have a very subtle effect on phenotype and genotype. So genetic entropy would suggest, okay, kind of like a single spelling mistake in a book the size of an encyclopedia. One single spelling mistake on its own, it's inconsequential to the message, but the buildup and the accumulation of them over time will degrade the message and degrade the book. And that's what we see in our genetics. That's why man appears to be devolving. That's why there's like the genetic database of diseases is just growing every single year. It's entropic degeneration on every level. So the question for somebody who, let's say, disagrees with genetic entropy and the fact that man is presently devolving, the question would be, and the question I would have for you if you disagree with that is, what type of selection could rid the population of so many mutations that are just pouring into our genetics that natural selection can't even see? They're essentially invisible. Yeah, go ahead. What are your thoughts on that?
So when you say we're devolving, are you like saying that like we're becoming more susceptible like to diseases or something like that? Or
yeah, good question. I'm just saying that we are accumulating. According to our model, God created us perfect genomes. He created us not to reproduce by cloning.
Well, what do you mean by that? Like,
right. So we know that mutations are typographical errors in a text. You know, we accumulate, each gene has a different mutation rate. Mitochondrial DNA is going to mutate differently than the nuclear DNA, but the ones that are passed on generally in nuclear DNA in our germ cell lines is about 100 new mutations per person per generation. So mutations, we now know, are generally destructive. They're either nearly neutral or detrimental. And even the ones that are beneficial, like sickle cell anemia, they're still reductive in nature. There's a benefit and an adaptation to be had, but it's typically due to like a broken gene, broken protein. So genetic entropy just says, hey, listen, things are breaking down. Species are going extinct. Genetic mistakes are accumulating. If you take, David, according to our model, it makes sense, fits perfectly. We can take this point right now, this point of genetic entropy, this point of accumulating mutations, we can take that back in time to what's called a point of least accumulating mutations, where there is no mutations, no genetic mistakes, just those pre-existing functional created differences by God. That is what we mean by a perfect genome, free of genetic mistakes.